Hello everybody, it's Joey again. In this video I'm going to talk a little bit about weird CSS shapes. Most of them I'm going to make out of just one div, so they'll be pretty simple shapes. I'm also going to talk a little bit about understanding the box model, how borders behave, and box sizing. Understanding these things will allow you to make more complex shapes. So first I'm going to talk a little bit about border radius. So right here, scrolling all around. Right here I have a div with a class of radius. That's what I'm editing right here. So right now it's just a box that's 10 by 10 em, and so border radius, and you've probably seen this before if you've watched other tutorials or just other places on the web, other sites. Border radius is used to make round corners. So you can use absolute or relative units. So I could use, if I wanted to use like pixels, I could say like 25 pixels, and it just rounds the edges that much. You can also use a percentage. Okay, so if I did 50%, it would check the length of this side and this side, and start curving it halfway between those two sides. So 50% on this corner right here will make it start curving from here and end here. So if I do 50%. There, so it starts halfway. If I did it a quarter, 25%, it would be a little smaller. So now it's like a quarter of this length. You can also go higher and do like 100. And that will start curving at the very end. So it's basically just like a quarter of a circle at this point. If you set just one value, it affects all of the corners. If you set 2, the first value will be these two corners, the top left, and it always starts at the top left. And it'll just have the opposite corners, the parallel one. And 25% will be these ones. So if you do 3, then the first one would be the top left, and then it just goes clockwise. So it would go 50, 25%, 10%, and then the last one is just the second value again, so it would be parallel like that for the opposite corner. And if you have all 4 set, then it starts at the top left and it just goes clockwise. And that works for almost any like property that takes 4 values. It normally, like if you use like margin and you have 4 different values, then it will start at the top and go clockwise. And if it changes the corners, it'll start at the top left and it goes clockwise. Okay, so next I'm gonna show you how to make a circle, and it's basically doing exactly what I'm doing with this one. I have a div called circle up top already, so I'm just affecting that. Take the same measurements. So we start off with just a box. If I add a border radius to it of 50%, that's how you make a circle. Or if you don't want to use a percentage, you can just do the math. So half of 10 would be 5em. So if I put 5em in here, it'll also make a circle, because that's 50% of the length of one of the sides. If it's not a square, it'll act a little differently, but it'll still find the like 50% of each side. So now it's basically just like an oval if you do that. If I was using M, it would look a little different. I'll show you. See, so now it's acting kind of like an absolute unit instead of just finding half the width. Okay, next I'm gonna make a Raindrop. So just have a div with the class of Raindrop already. Take the same measurements. I'm going to do 4 values now. So the first one's 0, 50%, 50%. I could stop here if I wanted to. If I add 50% again, it's already 50% set right here. Excuse me. So you only have to add 3 really. And to turn it on its edge, you could use a transform, rotate, and just by 45 degrees, I think. Yeah, so now it's a raindrop. You could mess with this if you want it to be a little different. You could maybe change the sides a little, something like that. You know, just what I'm showing you, really, it's important to just take what I show you and just mess with it a lot, because that's how you're going to find some cool results. You know, if you wanted it to be flatter, maybe you know, if you make this an animation, you can make it look like it's bouncing or something. If you go from like 50 to something like 90, it's like being squashed. And right now I have a selector that's selecting everything, and it's adding a transition to everything. So anything that can be animated transitions. So as you can see, the border radius can be animated if you want to do that. I think it's kind of neat. Alright, so what's next? So next I'm going to talk a little about the box model. I'm going to hide these things just so I have a little more room. There it is. The mouse is messed up. Okay, so I'm just going to explain the box model a little, because when you get into complex shapes, it's pretty important to understand how the box model works. It's pretty important to understand anyway, really. Okay, so in the center of the box we have content, and then we have padding, okay, so in the center we have content, which, like this, it could just be text. Could be a few different things. Could be an image or something like that. So in the center you have content, and then you have padding, then you have border, which I'll just add like, and we have border, and on the outside of the border we have the margin. So the padding, I'll mark it up a little. Okay, so content is something like text. When you adjust the padding, the space, it adds space in between the border and the content. And when you add margin, it adds space outside of the border. If there's no border, it still works the same. It'll just be content, padding, and then margin. But it's important to understand the box model, especially when we get into more complex shapes like trapezoids and stuff like that. Okay, so I'm just going to hide this. And I'm going to leave this a link to this pen in the description below, so you can mess with this too if you want. Next, I'm going to talk a little about box sizing. And right now in my CSS with this global selector, if that's what it's called. Basically, if you have an asterisk, it affects everything unless you beneath it, you know, say otherwise. Like if I gave the body right here like a margin of like, you know, 10 pixels or whatever, then because it's after this, that's how CSS works. It cascades. So right now I have my box sizing set to border box, and what that means is if I add a padding or a border, okay, so let me explain it like this. I have this box right here is 10 by 10 M, and this is just a ruler, so each checker represents 1 M. So, you know, watch. That's 1 M, that's 2 M, 3. Right now I have it set at 10. So as you can see, it's the same width right now. And because I have this, I have everything set. I have the box sizing set as border box. If I add a padding to this, or if I add a border, say I'll add a border of 1M solid black. See, the border grows inside. So this box is still 10 by 10. If I change it to content box, the border grows outward. So as you can see, this is still 10 M wide. Adding a border when it's set to content box adds space outside of the measurements that you give it right here. So I set it to be 10 by 10 M, but right now this whole element is actually, it's actually 12 wide. Everything by default is box sizing content box. So up top, and you'll see this in a lot of tutorial videos, people like to have their box sizing set to border box, so that's why I have it set here. I guess it's just a preference, honestly, but you'll see in a lot of videos, in a lot of tutorials and things like that, people like to work in a setting where the only space added outside is the margin. It makes math a little easier. You don't have to, you know, there's less guesswork really. So the same thing would be if this is set to content box and you add padding, it adds the padding to the outside also. So if I add another 1M, look, now the box grew. But if I have this set to border box, you know, the only thing it would do would move the content inside. So if I have some content, right now there's no padding, so it's right up against the edge. But if I add padding, it just pushes it towards the middle. With content box, it still pushes it towards the middle, but what it does is it adds space on the outside. So right here would be, you know, the 10 M width mark. Okay, so now that we talked about box sizing, let's talk a little about borders. All right, so there are a few ways to there are a few ways to put a border, few ways to put borders onto elements. The first is the shorthand, which is just border. So you can, okay, I'll set a width first, a width and a height. So do what we've been doing, just 10 by 10, so it's a square. I'll add a border of 1 pixel solid black. Okay, so with the shorthand, you set the width, the style, and the color. And I'm pretty sure you can do it in different orders also, but it's important that you make sure you put all 3 values. If you don't set a color, I think it defaults to black. but you know, it's a good habit to put that anyway. Another way you can do it is specifying specifically the border width, the style, and the color. So I could do the same thing, basically, 1 pixel. I'll do 1em actually, it'll be easier to see probably. Style, solid, and color, I'll do navy. So the benefit of doing this is just like border radius, you can set different values for each. If you can have 4 different values basically for each side. So I could do 1em, 2em, 3em, 4em, and as you can see, each border right now is a different size. Similarly, if you can do the same thing with style and color. So you can do solid, dotted. It's pretty funky looking. Dashed, and groove. And you can do the same thing with color, so I could do red, white, blue, and black. Or let's do gray, so you can actually see the groove. Okay, so as you can see, you know, if you mix all of these values, you can make some pretty weird looking things. And these things, as you saw, like, they can animate too, so you can do some pretty interesting stuff with this. It's pretty odd. Another thing you can do is it's kind of a mix where you mark it like shorthand, except you can specify border top, border right, bottom, and left. So I could do, like, you know, just if I just want it only the top border, I could do 1 pixel, or I'll do 1em actually. Solid blue. And so now it's only the top. And I'm gonna show you, if you don't set the width and the height, right now I just have a padding. And I'll set each of these. 1em, solid, I'll just keep doing solid for everything. Red, 1em solid yellow, and 1em solid green. Okay, so the padding right now is on the inside and the border is on the outside. If I put margin, that would be outside of the border. And because I didn't set a width for anything, it's just 1em from the center, so it'll be 2em wide, 2em tall in the center. If I get rid of the padding, watch what happens. So now, because there's no content and there's no padding, the only width is what you're setting with the border. And look at, let me make this a little bigger so you can see it a little better. I'll do, yeah, 4 is probably a good size. See how it reacts, how at the corner they meet up diagonally. And even if there is content or padding, they still meet up diagonally when all of them are set. And this is an interesting thing to notice because you can actually mess with that a lot. Watch what happens when I turn the top one transparent, because you can set it as transparent if you want. So it's still diagonal, acting as if there is a border, it's just that it's see-through. If I get rid of it completely, it's flat, so you can use that to your advantage when making different shapes. You can do some pretty interesting things with that. If you take the padding away, now it looks like you just cut a triangle out. If I get rid of yellow, then, or if I make it transparent rather, now it just looks like a bow tie. So you can do some pretty interesting stuff. Alright, what else do I have? So next, now that we're done with borders, I'm going to keep going with making shapes with borders. The first one I'm going to make is a triangle. So first what I'll do is I'll do border bottom, border left, border right. Let's do border bottom, I'll do 10M solid blue. I'll do navy. I like navy more. And then I'll do left, and right now it's not appearing because it only has a height set, and so the width would be like 0% basically. But if I add another border, 5M solid white, ooh, that's a slide. And another border on the other side. Slot again. I really like writing slot. So this is what it would look like if each one was set as a color. And because I didn't set a top border, it just connects to the center. If I did set a top, I'll show you what it would look like. I'll do 1M. Or I'll do blue again, or navy. Okay, so that's what it would look like. If I set this to 0, you'll see that it just shrinks like that. It just pushes the center where they all meet up. It just pushes it around. So that's how you would make a triangle. But you can just not set the top. And then you could set the other two as transparent. That's the wrong one. Okay, so next we'll make a trapezoid, and I'll just add it right underneath. So the border width, I will, basically what I'm doing is the same thing. So the top, we don't need 1, so I'll just do 0. And then, like I said before, it goes clockwise. So it starts at the top, right, bottom, and then left. So right, I'll do 5M, 10M, and then 5M. And this, basically, I'm just making the same width and all of that of each border, but in a different way to show you how you can do it, a separate way. So the top is nothing, and then we will have, I'll just do white and navy, and, oh, that's style. Solid, and white and navy, or the other way around. And right now it looks the same, but if you set the width, and because it's set as a border box right now, the width, if I set the width to 10M, this is already 10M wide, so it's not going to respond if I set it to 10M. It's basically, it's set to the same thing. If I set it for less, it can't get any smaller because the border width is contradicting that. But if I set it to more, now they don't meet up in the middle anymore. So that's how you would make a trapezoid. Because if I was to adjust the sides without adding a width, this is what would happen. And I'll add a top just to show you. Okay. So if I just, made the sides wider, it would just like kind of push the center around instead. And what you need is you need to set the width to be more than the borders combined. And that's how it would work. You know, set these to this to transparent, and that's a trapezoid. And you could do that, you know, if you decided you wanted to make a trapezoid like that too. That's still a trapezoid. You could do that. Okay, next, Pac-Man. Basically, I'll take 4 borders. So I'll do border width, border style, and border color. I'll just make it yellow because that's what color Pac-Man is. Width, I'll just make each the same, so I'll just do 5 for everything. And solid. Oops. And right now it's just a square, but if I just do black, oh, messed that up. I think my computer's being slow. Anyway, add a border radius of 50%, and as you can see, it keeps the borders still act in the same manner, but it rounded down all of the corners. So now it's a circle, but it's made only with borders. So basically now what you would do is you can set this one as transparent, if I can spell it right. Okay, see, now it's like a Pac-Man shape. And if you just have this border, I'm going to do it this way instead, just a second. Sure. Okay. What was I going to do? Oh, right. Okay, so right now I have the left set as transparent. If, say, okay, I'm going to put a padding because it looks a little better when I do that. It's a little easier to explain. Okay, so now it's basically just a ring. And because this is set as transparent, it's just flat right here. But if I actually just get rid of it, it'll act different. It kind of acts like a crescent, which is pretty odd. See how it just like gets thinner. Yeah, it's kind of neat. So if I get rid of another one, if say I get rid of the top, it just kind of like points up at the end instead. But when you set it to transparent, it stops flat, basically. See what I mean? You could set this as a different size also, and it kind of explains what is happening when you set it to 0 width. It's kind of neat. But yeah, so that's how you would make Pac-Man. You can do some interesting stuff with it if you wanted to like animate it. You could. I'll do that really quick. I'll probably just speed the process up and show you how. Okay, so now I have, I basically just made two of these shapes and I put one on top of the other by positioning the one inside. I have it right here. By positioning this one as absolute in relation to its parent. So as you can see, it's just right on top of it. And actually, I'll make this a different color. So I'll make this red. So you can see it's actually right on top. And if I rotate this 90 degrees, and you can make this neater. It kind of makes it look like it's closing its mouth if this is still yellow. So it's animatable. It's kind of neat, right? Whoop, what did I just do? Okay, so finally, I'm just going to do a little time lapse showing the kinds of things you can do when you mix all of these together. Okay, so I'm probably just going to time lapse all of this. I'm going to make a face. All right, here we go. All right, so there you go. Yeah, as you can see, you know, all I did was mix together all of the things that I showed you before. And it's using really simple shapes too. And now it's looks like kind of like complex, just like alien emoji or something like that. But yeah, so, you know, that's a few ways to make complex shapes. Obviously, that's not the only way you can make shapes with CSS. You know, a lot of people will use SVG when things get complicated. Obviously, you know, making something like this with SVG, it could end up being a lot less markup for you. So maybe I'll make a video on SVG later. If you have any questions or comments or anything like that, you can leave a comment below. Like I said, I will leave a link to this code pen in the description also. Thanks for watching. Hopefully you guys found this useful. All right, see ya.